Okay, welcome back. It's Chris here, and we're going to get right back into things here. We're doing our small composition here. This would be a scene maybe you saw in a magazine or in a art book or possibly a picture or a photograph you might have seen online, or maybe you've taken a photograph. You're out sightseeing or at the park, or you know, you have some interesting reference material, and now you're going to want to create a painting. And so first thing we do is we say, let's make a smaller composition like this here first. Get it kind of like the way we want it, lay it out correctly on our paper, check out the colors we're going to use. And so that's what we're doing. We're working right through this scene here. And simple shore scene with some sailboats and some water, some distant shore houses, and a little bit of mountains and hills, and then we have another small maybe cottage here along the shore, some sand, some bushes, and so we're in good shape here. So we have our first glazing, which we did in part one, light coat of lots of water and paint. We used cobalt blue for the sky with a touch of burnt umber, and then we went and we did the foreground with the same thing, a little bit of cobalt blue and burnt umber, mixed in with some raw sienna, and then we did some um, burnt umber and French ultramarine blue for the dark here, the darks. So we're just going to sort of get this one a little more to the point where we can use it for our guide for our larger painting coming up. So here we're going to just do a little more. So we'll mix some more paint. We'll do some French ultramarine blue, some burnt umber, French ultramarine blue, and we're pretty much going straight out of the tube paint, not using much, hardly any water, just the water that gets onto the brush when we rinse our brush, and maybe tap it off a little bit on a sponge or a napkin or whatever we have. Tissue. I usually keep a tissue on my by my palette with my hand, so I hold my tissue here with my fingers, tap the brush a little bit, get some excess paint off, and then we just do a little more detail here. Okay, now we're here, since this is a composition, can I make a suggestion? When you are doing your compositions like this and you kind of have a good feel of confidence with this, and you don't actually have to get so fussy with every single color. You kind of just, you want to see how it's, looking in a general sense here. So I want to make sure I get my darks in here, and then maybe we're going to do these nice masks. Keep our hand on the paper, brush down, and then just slide our arm to get some variation. We take some paint off the brush, make a couple of them lighter maybe, skip a spot maybe, make a couple taps. The ones in the distance, let's go with a little more blue in them. Like we usually mention, as things go into the distance, they get a little cooler, which means, a little more blue, bluish green. And so we're just going to do a few more masks of the sailboats and boats, whatever's here. A couple of them lean, a couple of them are straight. Maybe a couple boat shapes. And then I will use a little bit of different color here. Maybe we'll go with a little bit of a reddish color for that sailboat, just to remind ourselves that we want to, in our larger painting that we go to next, we're going to just make sure we mix up the colors a little bit. But this is looking fine. This is maybe a little rocks. For the rocks, I just do a couple taps of the brush to splatter some paint there give us some texture. Maybe a few more feelings of some grass and maybe some bushes there. Maybe another couple splashes. All right, that looks good. Okay, so let's talk about moving up to the next size painting. So now we're going to encounter the larger style painting we're looking for, and we're going to have to realize that when we're doing a larger painting, we're going to increase our brushes. So we'll have our next round of brushes set up next to our work area. I dampen all the brushes with some water to start out with, so they're damp and ready to go when we're going to be painting. And then for our palette, let me zoom back a little bit here. Okay. Okay, that's much better. So now here we're using our round brushes with good points. Kolinsky Sable brushes, very, very good brushes. Brushes are probably the most important tool you have as an artist, for a watercolor artist. So the brushes, always try to buy the best brush you can. And you can research on YouTube. There's tons of great videos out there and on brushes and people that do critiques on brushes and so forth for watercolors. Okay, so we're going to get into the next painting. We're going to have our small comp set up across from us, and we're going to use that for our guide. Okay, and I'm going to contour draw. Okay, now we're good. Those were the two shacks along the shore here. Okay, and then we're going to go into the distance here and some tree shapes, and then we have a couple distant houses there, and then we have maybe a mountainous area here. Okay, that's the shoreline approximately in the distance there. And then we sort of start to see things trail this way. Nice angle into the picture, so this is a really good angle into the subject matter. And then we have some bushes over here, so we'll just make some marks to remember to. We're going to have some grass and bush ideas down here a little bit, and then some rocks over here. And then we're going to have a couple boats over here. Like this. Okay, we have a mast there, and then another, maybe a boat over here. And we're just going quickly here. Now this is the idea of a finished painting. I'm going quickly here for demonstration purposes, so I'm not trying to be perfect. I mean, if I was doing this for, for a show or for a gallery showing or something, I'd take more time and I'd go a little, go quite a bit slower. I'm contour drawing here with a little kind of a sketchier feel to it. Contour drawing's a little more exacting and slower, but same thing with the rhythm, going from one section to the next, being careful, watching all the angles and so forth, and shapes, and connecting everything together. Okay, so this is looking good. We have our basic idea, and now we see that when we are getting into a larger painting, we are gonna recall that more paint, more water, bigger brushes. We're going to have to work a little faster too, because things are going to dry a little quicker on a larger paper, because there's more more ground to cover. Does that make sense? That there's more ground to cover on a larger painting, so you're kind of racing against time. Now that's if you're doing a faster type painting like this, like a looser, painting that's more, of that style of loose and quick. If you take your time and you do more of a alla prima painting, you have more time to work, and you're not so much working against time so much. You can take a little more time, but you still have to look at your painting and be careful on the different sections and where things are drying. So again, that's a key. If I make a suggestion here, one of the keys of watercolor that's really important is kind of getting the feel for things the way they're drying, and if you can kind of keep a track of your painting, and as you're working, try to think about where things are drying and where things are still wet, and if you can go back in again and work a little bit while it's damp. So it takes time to get the feel for it, but I know you will. Some of you are already pros at it. Okay, so now that we're doing larger format, I would go to a larger well so that we can get more water and paint. Here you have to be careful when you're working over your paper. I tend to keep my palette away from the paper, but I'm demonstrating here, so I'm going to just, I would keep the palette away from the paper, like you wouldn't want to keep your palette over the paper like this. I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes, so your palette would be, maybe to the side of your workstation, to the right if you're a right-handed person, or to the left if you're a left-handed person. So then here we have the little bit of burnt umber in there too. So this is going to be our sky wash. Then maybe toward the bottom we can add a little bit of burnt sienna. Raw sienna, I should say. I leave a little bit of white for the clouds. And I bring a little bit of that blue too into the foreground. Okay, and then while you have the paper really still wet, you can go in and add a little bit of water to give yourself a little bit of an effect of clouds. Maybe you could take a tissue possibly at times, and do a little dabbing to give a light effect or some cloud. Tissues are, you can get some good effects. I would try to stick with just the water and the paint. But once in a while the tissue does look good. You can get a kind of a cloudy feel. So I did that over here on the left and maybe a little bit over here on the right. And watercolor is kind of trial and error, experimenting. Have fun, try new things. That's a big part of watercolor too, is just having fun, try new things, new techniques, variety. Have fun with it. The more techniques and things you learn, you can find out which ones you like more. You use those a little more frequently in your paintings. You find out what the look you're looking for is, and then you use those techniques a little more often, let's say. All right, so that's our first wash. That is looking good. I might just a couple spots maybe. Lighten up. Okay. All right, let's come back for part 3 and we'll do our darks, midtones and darks, and that will be the completion of the painting, and we'll see that we have moved a little faster. We've used larger brushes, lots more water. We utilized